Sarah, and today I'm going to be doing part 2 of my February wrap-up. In part 2, I'm going to be talking about all of the fiction books that I chose to read in the month of February. If you want to know some more stats and my goals wrap-up and some of those other stuff, as well as rereads, DNFs, and non-fiction books that I read in the month of February, check out part 1 of this video. I will link it down below for all of you guys. I will also link all of my reading vlogs for the month of February down below in case you guys want a little bit more information in some of the books that I talked about, because I talk a little bit more in depth about them in my vlogs than I do in the wrap-ups, because I have so much content to go through and very little time to do that. Also, while I'm going through these books, I will start with the lowest rated book in the month and work my way up to the highest rated book for the month. So without further ado, let's just get started. So the lowest rated book that I read in the month of February is Life and Death by Stephanie Meyer. This is a reimagining of Twilight. I borrowed this from the library because I thought it was a cute idea for an author to do for their book, and I wanted to see how well it would go. I wasn't even sure if I was going to end up reading it, but I was in a reading slump at the time and I just wanted something that was fast-paced and compelling, and I thought this one would do that for me because I already knew like how the story goes. I enjoyed it. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did, because it was definitely interesting, because in Life and Death, it's different from Twilight because all of the gender roles are switched. So Bella turns into Beau, a guy basically, and Edward is Edith, and then like all of the other characters' genders have been switched also, except for Charlie and Renee. And it was definitely interesting. I thought like there were parts of it that like it's the same character doing like the same thing, but because they were a different gender, I felt very different about it. So that was definitely interesting to see, but it wasn't like life-shattering or anything. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Like, it was fine. I definitely will not be buying that book, but if you've read the Twilight series and you're a fan of the Twilight series, I definitely recommend checking it out because it is pretty interesting and the ending might surprise you. Honestly, I think the ending for this one is how the Twilight series should have ended. The next book that I want to talk about is a book that I listened to on audiobook, and that is Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. I actually really enjoyed the ending of this book. The ending of this book I actually really enjoyed. Also, the audiobook is phenomenal for this book. I did a full review for this book, so I will link that up above for you guys if you guys want to check that out. This is one of those books that is just really difficult to talk about because there's a lot of this book that I really liked, and then there's a good part of this book that I was just kind of like, ugh. I just like, it was hard to get through. Let's put it that way. It took a lot of brain power and it was hard to get to. It was really hard to follow. So I had very mixed feelings about this book. So the next book I want to talk about is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I borrowed this book from the library, so I read it as a physical book, not as an audiobook. I kind of wish that I listened to it as an audiobook because I feel like that could have been like the perfect form for this book because it is poetry. Mind you, I read Black Leopard, Red Wolf as an audiobook, and it was so good as an audiobook because of the poetic feeling of the writing. And so I kind of wish that I had listened to The Poet X as an audiobook because I think that the audiobook could be really good for this one. And I did enjoy most of this book. I loved the main character of this book. She is like just one of those characters that you can stand behind and love, but she's still flawed, and you know she's gonna make mistakes, but you can root for her to move past those mistakes. And I just loved her because of that. And I also like the interweaving plot lines. It just, the ending was a little bit disappointing for me because the one plot line that I didn't care as much about is the one that ended the book, as opposed to the other plot lines that I felt like could have been really great. So I feel like this was a really good book that I completely understand why so many people like it. It just didn't work for me as well as I wanted it to. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. The next book that I want to talk about is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I listened to this book on audiobook. It was one of the first books that I finished in the month of February. I honestly don't remember that much about it other than it is a murder mystery slash thriller because thriller elements start seeping into the plot later on. But basically it is set in a boarding school, and in the boarding school there was a murder like a long time ago that the authorities believe has been solved, but our main character doesn't think that it has been. She believes that it's still a cold case, that the person who confessed to the murder did not actually commit the murder. So her motivation and goal is to solve that case. And honestly, for the first like 1/3 of this book, I was kind of bored. Like, I was just kind of bored. If it wasn't an audiobook, I probably wouldn't have continued on with it, but I continued on with it and I got really invested into it. Something happens like about 1/3 of the way into it and I got really invested invested into it, and I really enjoyed like my read throughout the whole thing. The problem is I didn't realize that this book was the first book in a series. I wanted to read a single standalone mystery, but it's the first book in a series. So there was a lot of setup for later books that didn't get paid off in this first book, which just annoyed me because I didn't plan on reading the second book and the third book in this series, just because it's not really necessarily my style of book. So I kind of got turned off because of that. But overall, like the last 2/3 of this book was definitely very enjoyable. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I really enjoyed reading this book. I love Laini Taylor's writing style, and this is the type of book that I just definitely thought like her writing style would do very well in, and it definitely does. I loved it in this book. We are following a character named Karu who has been raised by Kemmerer, basically, and she doesn't know anything about her past, so this book is kind of her finding out about her past and who she is, and it's fantastic. There are Kemmerer in this book, there are angels in this book. This is kind of like a paranormal romance, but it kind of veers away from that also, and I really enjoyed this book. I definitely want to move on with the next 2 books in this series. I definitely enjoyed it. It's not as good as some of her other writing that I've read and I really loved. So I ended up giving this 4 stars, but I definitely enjoyed it and plan on continuing on with this series. The next book I want to talk about is a very recent read, and that is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. I really enjoyed this book. I was in a massive reading slump when I ended up picking up this book, and this book does such a great job of like pulling me out of that slump. It is fast-paced, it is so much fun, and it's a modern Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it was just done so well. I really enjoyed all of the characters in this book. The characters are so relatable. It was just such a fun book, and I really enjoyed it. I actually have a full review on this one, so if you want more information, I will link that review up in the cards for you, and you can definitely check that out. But really good book. I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read this book yet. It's a pretty new release too, so it's definitely a good one that you should check out. And I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. So now we're going to be moving on to the books that I rated 5 stars for the month. The first book that I want to talk about is The Lightning Thief by Riordan. I did not have very high expectations for this book because I have picked up this book in the past, and I DNF'd it after like 2 pages, mind you. Like, it wasn't very much, but I didn't really like the writing style, so I picked it up on audio and I listened to the audiobook and was completely blown away by it. I wasn't expecting to like this book very much, and I absolutely loved it. So I ended up giving it 5 stars. I'm currently reading the second book in the series, Seas of Monsters, and so far I'm really enjoying it. But I really love the Greek and Roman gods aspect of this book. I like the mythology behind it. I think Percy is a very interesting character, and I like how deep this book goes. Like, you actually get to meet some of the gods and stuff like that, which I think is fantastic. So definitely enjoyed it. Great middle grade series that if you haven't read, I don't know where I've been because I haven't read it in so long, because everyone else seems to have read this book already, but I really enjoyed it, and I definitely plan on continuing on with the series. So for the last 2 books that I read this month, they're definitely my favorite books that I read this month. I can't choose between them, so I'm just gonna give them to you in the order that I read them. But they're both fantastic, and both of them are some of my new favorite authors. So I'm so excited to talk about these. The first one is The Great Alone by Kristin Hanna. You guys know I love Kristin Hanna. She is fantastic. This is following a family who decides to move to the Alaskan wilderness after the father comes home from war. So the father does have some PTSD in this book, and I just love the family drama aspect to this book because you can know all of the characters in this book. You can see all of the like great character traits that they have and see all of their flaws, and still root for every single character in this book. Even the dad, who is not a very good person in this book, you can still root for him because you know what a hard time he's having and what he's going through. And I really love that aspect of this book. Kristin Hanna writes like that all the time, and I absolutely loved it. I also really love the setting of this book. This is technically historical fiction. For me, it felt like reading contemporary. I feel like stuff like this can happen in today's time, even though like the setting and the time period definitely played a role in this book. It was such a good book. Like there's a love story in here, by the way, which is it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and I absolutely loved it. I loved how the characters, Laini is the daughter, and I love how she gets like attached to Alaska and the wilderness there, and how that becomes her home, and we can kind of feel why it's her home and all of that. Like, I personally will never live in Alaska. Like, I live in Florida. I hate the winter, like hate the winter with a passion. Like, it's 85 degrees outside and it's February. Actually, it's March now because I'm filming this a day late. But like, it's 85 degrees outside and like, this is my winter. Like, okay, maybe not. We're going into spring now, but still, I could not handle the winter that they have in northern Alaska where there's like no sun outside for 6 months. But in here, like, I got to feel the love for it the way she felt the love for it, and I absolutely love that about this book. Definitely one of my new favorites, and I need to read more by Kristin because she is an amazing author. She doesn't write in a genre that I normally read in. I think she writes both contemporary and historical fiction, but every time I pick up one of her books, I absolutely love it. So if you haven't read this book yet, highly, highly recommend. Also, I listened to the audiobook for this one. I know I have a physical copy of it, but I listened to the audiobook for this one, and the audiobook for this one is really good too, so I recommend the audiobook also. And the last book that I want to talk about, I love just as much, and that is Beartown by Frederick Backman. You have no idea how much I love this book. It is so good. I listened to the audiobook of this one, but I'm definitely planning on getting a physical copy because I need to reread this book. This is following a hockey town called Beartown, and we get to see like many different character perspectives in the town. At the beginning, a lot of the economy of the town is attached to hockey, and they have a junior team who is very, very good and is going to go to the finals. So they want the junior team to win in the finals because it can bring a lot of wealth to the town. But right before the final game, there is a rape involving one of the characters on the junior team, and we get to see kind of like the fallout from what happens with that, all of the different character perspectives and how they treat the different people involved in this scenario. It was just so beautifully done. I loved the writing in this book. Like, the first sentence in the book just like hooked me immediately. I loved every part of it. I absolutely enjoyed it. And he just came out with the second book called Us Against You, which I have on hold at my library that I'm super excited for. Like, this book, you didn't need a sequel to it. Like, it was complete on its own. But I'm still super excited for the sequel because I know it'll be just as good. And Frederick Backman is definitely like one of my new favorite authors because this book, it was a masterpiece. It was so, so well done. So that's all the books that I read in the month of February. I really, really enjoyed most of the books that I read in this month. I thought I had a really great reading month despite the like in and out of reading slump that I was in the month of February. If you want more details on those books, I have all of the links to the vlogs as well as the unwrap up from yesterday, and I will also link the reviews that I have done for these books down below as well. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I post videos every Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday, sometimes more than that, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!